Good evening, it's Friday the 6th of June and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Diplomatic talks, Trump speaks with Xi Jinping in the first conversation since political comeback. Thailand to Cambodia, Prime Minister issues strong warning. Emotional meeting, patient reunites with scientists behind life-saving breakthrough.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Akhil Qureshi.
Good evening once again. The leaders of two countries held a phone call yesterday, the first since President Donald Trump took office in January. President Trump describes the conversation as positive.
Expectations are growing for renewed trade talks between the U.S. and China following months of tensions. That comes after U.S. President Donald Trump said he held a phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday, his first since returning to the Oval Office. Trump described the 90-minute call as a very good talk, saying the main focus was on trade with positive outcomes.
We had a very good talk, and we've straightened out any complexity. We're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets.
After the call, Trump posted on social media that follow-up talks will be arranged soon, involving Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He also said that he has accepted an invitation from Beijing to visit China with the First Lady. Trump said he also invited Xi to the U.S., expressing hope that such a visit would take place. China's state media outlet Xinhua also confirmed the conversation, saying it was requested by the White House. It reported that Xi had requested Washington to remove negative measures against Beijing, to stick to the recent agreement made in Geneva. Xinhua also reported China's message to the U.S. to handle Taiwan with prudence, to avoid being dragged into a dangerous situation of conflict by Taiwan independent separatists. The report also said Trump expressed a welcoming stance toward Chinese students willing to study in the U.S., signaling a policy change.
India's central bank has lowered interest rates by a deeper than expected 0.5%, the third cut in a row amid falling inflation and low growth in Asia's third largest economy.
The Reserve Bank of India has cut the repo rate to 5.5%, the lowest in 3 years, aiming to increase liquidity in the system and make borrowing more affordable for consumers. The repo rate, which determines the cost at which commercial banks borrow from the central bank, directly influences interest rates on loans like those for homes and cars. RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra explained that growth remains below expectations and the rate cut is intended to boost domestic consumption and investment amid global uncertainties. This move follows two earlier reductions and comes despite India maintaining its position as the world's fastest growing major economy, though growth has slowed from the previous year's peak.
In India's Assam state, relentless floods have submerged vast farmland and villages, leaving residents in a desperate struggle for essentials. Villagers also say that they're battling serious shortages of drinking water and food as crisis continues to unfold.
Drone footage showed inundated farmlands and houses in Morrigan, one of the worst affected districts in the state. Displaced villagers were also seen living on roadside in makeshift tents with children and the elderly. While the situation was said to be getting better with people returning to their homes with floodwaters receding in some states, Assam State Chief Himanta Biswa Sarma warned that it was a temporary relief. Sarma said this was the first wave of many expected floods Assam experiences every year, stating that he cannot say as of now that there is any improvement in the flood situation.
Thailand's Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra convened a National Security Council meeting affirming the military's readiness to defend the nation's sovereignty. However, she also admits that emphasizing the government remains committed to pursuing peace as much as possible amid the rising regional tensions.
Earlier, the Thai military issued a statement declaring it is prepared to launch a high-level operation to counter any violation of its sovereignty, marking its strongest stance yet amid a simmering border dispute with Cambodia. This tension reignited following a deadly clash last week. The army also revealed that intelligence reports show Cambodia has increased its military readiness along the border even as diplomatic efforts continue, calling the situation worrisome. Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra stressed that the government and the military are in constant consultation and fully support each other. The two countries had recently exchanged carefully worded statements, committing to dialogue after a brief skirmish in an undemocratic border area on May 28, which resulted in the death of a Cambodian soldier.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Russia launched a mass missile and drone attack against Ukraine overnight, targeting the capital, major cities and the country's far western region. The attack comes a day after Russian President and of course this is Vladimir Putin, promising to retaliate against Ukraine for its drone strike against Russian air bases in phone call with the US President Donald Trump.
Tonight, a ferocious Russian assault following Ukraine's coordinated drone strikes deep inside Russia. Russia now blasting residential high-rises in Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv and destroying this government building in Kherson. The barrage leaving more than 40 people dead or wounded across Ukraine. And Ukraine is now bracing for even more, what could be a much larger Russian attack at any moment. A response to that stunning Ukrainian drone operation, drones lifting out of containers atop trucks and flying to their targets, destroying at least 10 Russian warplanes, including nuclear-capable bombers worth billions. And in a remarkable scene in the Oval Office today, President Trump, after campaigning he could end the war in Ukraine on day one, suggesting it might be better to let both sides fight for a while, even though it was Russia which invaded Ukraine.
But sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart.
But German Chancellor Merz making it clear Germany is on the side of Ukraine. The Chancellor saying there is a difference between what Ukraine is doing and what Russia is doing.
We get satellite pictures of the warfield, and you don't even like to look at them, right?
It's terrible.
So
it's really
bodies, arms, heads, legs all over the place, and you've never seen anything like it. It's so ridiculous.
And this is only by Russian weapons against Ukraine. This had never happened with Ukraine weapons against Russia. Never. Ukraine is only targeting military targets, not civilians, not private, not energy infrastructure. So this is the difference, and that's the reason why we are trying to do more on Russia, how to stop this war.
The rift between US President Donald Trump and his former advisor Elon Musk has erupted into the open, with each trading insult after the tech billionaire criticized one of Trump's key domestic policies.
Donald Trump's very public falling out with Elon Musk could throw the US space program into turmoil. The pair engaged in an escalating fight on social media, sparked by the billionaire's criticism of Trump's tax and spending plans. It culminated with the president threatening to terminate government contracts for SpaceX. That's the rocket firm owned by Musk, which has become a key player in space launches. Now about $22 billion in public contracts could be at risk if Trump goes through with his threat. It could also throw US space operations into chaos, as NASA relies on SpaceX's Dragon craft to get astronauts to and from the International Space Station. Responding to Trump's threat, Musk initially said he would immediately begin decommissioning the Dragon, seemingly removing it from service. But he later backtracked, saying that wouldn't happen. NASA declined to comment directly on the situation, but said it would continue to work with industry partners to meet the president's objectives. Musk's previous closeness to Trump had seemed to yield wins for SpaceX. That included proposals to shift NASA's priority from the Moon to a mission to Mars, Musk's pet project. Meanwhile, his ally Jared Isaacman, a billionaire private astronaut, was nominated to head the space agency. However, Trump then nixed that nomination over the weekend in an early sign of the coming rift, later saying Isaacman was totally Democrat. Now there's huge uncertainty over what happens next, with Musk and Trump both highly unpredictable forces. But it all adds to the turmoil for NASA, which has been whipsawed by proposed staff and budget cuts that would put dozens of science programs at risk.
On his second day in office, President Lee of South Korea had a lengthy cabinet meeting focusing on wildfire response and relocating the Oceans Ministry in Busan. He emphasized public safety and concealed 2 judicial nominations from the previous administration.
It was the first cabinet meeting for President Lee Jae-myung on Thursday, and it lasted well over the scheduled time for 4 hours. And, quote, awkwardness ensued for those hours as President Lee discussed state matters with the cabinet, who were appointed by impeached former President Yoon Suk-yeol. This is a rare occasion as President Lee doesn't get a transition period and assume the role first before shaping his own cabinet. The president and the cabinet ended up having kimbap for lunch at the meetings as it ran until his next meeting at 2 p.m. After listening, he ordered a number of things to the cabinet. One was reviewing whether to add additional helicopters for wildfire response. Another was preparing to move the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries to the port city of Busan as fast as possible. Meanwhile, the top office also says that most of the top office employees from the previous administration who had left came back to their posts.
Most of the former presidential office staff have returned to work, and the foundations to gradually resume operations are being laid. Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Eun-sik is scheduled to communicate with the staff regarding work-related matters during a staff meeting at the presidential office on Sunday, the 8th.
President Lee also held a meeting for public safety at the National Security Council's conference room. He emphasized the importance of public safety, wearing the yellow emergency response jacket for the first time as the president, and meeting with local government officials on accident prevention. Meanwhile, the top office also said that the president has canceled 2 constitutional court justice nominations made by former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, claiming it was out of his authority. One was Lee Wan-gyu, who also served as the Minister of Government Legislation under President Yoon, and the other was Han Sang-hun.
A terrifying moment at sea in Bali as a boat carrying 89 passengers capsized after being struck by a large wave. Incredibly, all on board were rescued safely with no fatalities reported in the dramatic incident.
Terrifying moments in paradise. As this boat, the police say, was carrying 89 passengers and a crew, capsized in Bali on Wednesday. Tourists on the lower level, including American Lauren Daig, desperate to get out. Bali police say a large wave hit the back of the boat, causing the ship to tilt to the left and lose balance. Let's leave the boat. Local police say everyone was rescued with no fatalities. Lauren, in Bali to celebrate her 24th birthday, says she's nursing bruises and stitches, but she's grateful to be alive.
More stories on the other side just after a short commercial break. Welcome back. A woman who battled sickle cell disease her entire life received a second chance thanks to a groundbreaking gene editing cure. Now, a decade later, she finally meets the Nobel Prize-winning scientist whose work transformed her life.
A first face-to-face meeting created by science and sacrifice. Dr. Jennifer Doudna won a Nobel Prize in Chemistry for research in 2020. Her work led to a revolutionary gene editing technique known as CRISPR. Victoria Gray, an activist and lecturer, is the first person with sickle cell disease to receive an experimental treatment using CRISPR in 2019.
She was patient number 1 in the first clinical trial.
On this night in May, Gray honored the woman whose discovery she credits with saving her life.
Dr. Doudna, could you please join us on stage?
Gray is among the more than 100,000 people in the United States living with sickle cell disease, according to the CDC. Sickle cell is an inherited disorder that affects red blood cells, causing the normally disc-shaped cells to take on a crescent shape that can clump together. It can lead to blood clots, organ damage, and excruciating pain. More than 90% of those impacted by sickle cell are Black, and up to 9% of patients are Hispanic or Latino. Until recently, the only cure was a bone marrow transplant, but only about 15% of people with sickle cell have a donor match. CRISPR has changed that. CRISPR eliminates the need for a donor because it uses gene editing technology to alter a patient's own cells. The FDA approved CRISPR for sickle cell in 2023. Gray says it has virtually cured her of the disease. In fact, today, Gray is very much alive, taking her first trip abroad with her husband. Doudna hopes the treatment, which costs millions per patient, can become more accessible for patients like Victoria Gray, now an advocate for CRISPR.
An unexpected visitor caused quite a stir at the grocery store in Thailand. An elephant wondered in delighting onlookers as it helps itself to a feast of rice crackers and sandwiches, and a banana, leaving employees both stunned and amused. Take a look.
Here's a riddle. Where does an elephant go to eat when it's hungry? The answer? Wherever it wants. That's something a grocery store in Thailand recently learned. Watch as this giant elephant crowds in to do some shopping for itself. Employees could only look on as this absolute unit reportedly helped himself to 9 bags of sweet rice crackers, a sandwich, and some bananas. The pachyderm typically resides at a nearby national park and is said to be a familiar sight to many locals. He's been known to visit people's homes in search of a bite to eat. But this is the first time he's been to the store. Judging by his successful haul, it may not be his last. There are an estimated 4,000 elephants living in the wild in Thailand. And as they lose their habitat to farming and other development, they're more likely to venture into areas occupied by humans, like this store. After several minutes, rangers from the park were able to get him to leave. The elephant snack run came to the tune of about $25, but you tried getting him to pay.
And with that, we come to the end of today's edition of World News Tonight. With the hopes of seeing you again, I'm Akwil Qureshi, and we are leaving you tonight with the visuals of an exhibition in Paris on the evolution of street art. Well, also don't forget to do send in your feedback through our email at feedback.ad24english@derana.lk or via WhatsApp at 076-805-7933. Anurad Singer will be joining you next on Nightly Business Report. Thank you for watching.